Hello and welcome back to another top 10 thingies of Final Fantasy XIV. Today we're taking a look at funny places you can land on in A Realm Reborn. We didn't used to always be able to fly in the A Realm Reborn areas. With patch 5.3, they ended up introducing flying into A Realm Reborn. And as a result, there are quite a few spots that we can now land in that we previously couldn't reach without flying. And we're going to go take a look at those. First place we're taking a look at is in Western Thanalan at the Beaconhill Lighthouse. At this location, there is this diorama-sized building structure leading all the way up to the lighthouse. Because it was in the Realm Reborn, they never expected the player to eventually be able to come up here. So it's scaled in a way that it looks a lot bigger than it actually is from distance. But as you see when we start walking on it, the entire area is tiny. Even tiny for, I'd say, a Lalafell. Looking at these doors, they wouldn't even really be suitable for a Lalafell with how wide they are. This ended up being one of the more funny ones that you can end up finding now that we are able to fly. Even comparing it to the entrance door at the bottom, you can see how big the scale was intended for these structures to be perceived from a distance. If you're familiar with the Golden Saucer, then this one might look familiar to you. But this one is in Eastern Thanalan. Next to the High Bridge, we can find this large statue. And on this statue, you can land on various parts of it. If you've participated in the Leap of Faith in the Golden Saucer, you might recognize this as the Fall of Belah'dia, as it shares the same model but scaled at different sizes. Unfortunately, going to here in Eastern Thanalan would not be a great way to practice this Leap of Faith, but seeing it at a different scale is a funny thing considering how they are the same location. Over at the Moraby Drydocks in Noscea, we get to see this ship being constructed on. If you follow the paths to the side, you'll eventually come to what seems like an area you could easily reach if you were allowed to jump to it, though sadly you cannot. Despite this, eventually we're allowed to go on the very top of the ship with flying. Strangely though, the various floors of this boat do not have collision that you can walk on. It's really weird what they decide to give collision for walking on in this game, even prior to an area being accessible by the player. It must be difficult for them to implement this, or maybe they simply don't have the resources or time to go around the Realm Reborn areas and give us places to land in that we normally couldn't before. Heading over to the North Shroud to Finder's Bluff. This is a small series of shacks that the miners built when they were surveying the location for various minerals. Up here you can land on the various scaffoldings as well as the shack on top of the tree, but in a rather weird twist, the one spot you think you would be allowed to land, the ground on this surface that all these buildings are on, you cannot. This is simply inaccessible to the player. My only thought could be that outside of them not having time is maybe they figured somebody might be able to exploit mobs in this location from here. But even thinking about that, they seem like they're all out of range to feasibly do this without a series of chains from players. Again, another location where it's very weird what you think you'd be able to land on versus what you can land on. Now for a small relaxation at Camp Bronze Lake in Upper Noscea. Here at this camp, way at the top, above the waterfall, is a small little platform that the player is able to land on. I like this spot particularly because of the quite beautiful view that you get of the location. Not only do you get a view of Sirius Lighthouse, but you also get to see the Wanderer's Palace. The vista for this location is amazing one to see for sure. Yep, that's a rock. And you can land on it. Well, land on the weird platforms circling it. I don't even know what's going on at this rock. Maybe these platforms are here to help assist larger boats passing into the bay. I'm not sure though, because even getting up to here, you need to be able to fly, and any normal civilian would have difficulty reaching here. It's not like there's a ladder going up to it or anything like that. So you would probably have to climb the face of the rock to even get up here. This was just such an odd place for the player to be able to land in what is clearly a hastily placed wooden platforms by the devs with all these overlapping objects. Even trying to land on here is a little finicky, as not the entire platform is landable, but instead like a small thin piece in the middle of all these wood planks. It seems like there's a lot of objects that just have baked in collision for the player to land on. And if the devs don't want you landing there, it seems like they have to go out of their way to make sure to turn off this function. I went here in one of my walk-alongs briefly to watch the sunset, and if you're not walking everywhere, this is probably a better place to stand to not only fish, but watch the coastline. Buzzing over to the East Shroud to visit Little Solace. Here at Little Solace, we can land on all of the huts of the sylphs. This is a nice relaxing place to hang out if you wanted to get some nice views of the forest and the fae. Though you do have to watch out for the fates that are in this location if you don't want to listen to the fate music while sitting in one of these huts. Along with these, there's also some funny little spots you can land on deeper in the woods, but I will leave those for you to discover. Wow, there sure is a lot of tree houses you can land on. And here's another one that's rather complex. On this one, there's various places you can land on different floors. This one I found kind of funny by the idea that it's currently occupied by former pirates sitting in a tree. So it makes me think that they just got bored, or maybe they couldn't get a job constructing boats at Moraby Drydocks. So now they're over here building tree houses of all things. This honestly would make for a great RP location if you're okay with the occasional NPC occupying the area, as it makes for a great sort of outpost location for the player to engage with. You thought I was kidding about treehouses? Think again, here's another one that we can land on. And at least this one has some logic to how the NPCs might have gotten up here, with a ladder being placed on it. This treehouse is located in eastern Noscea at the Severed String, for those who want to go investigate it for themselves. It is a very isolated location, and it's kind of really hard to get a view of anything from here due to how the branches reach out. But it's still a nice little peaceful spot to relax in if you enjoy the forest locations. And coming up last, we are heading over to Mor Dhona, which has a lot of spots you can now fly and land on. The ones I'm going to be highlighting here today, though, are the various bridges within the walls of this castle. Here you can land on these various bridges to get some spectacular views of the local area. One including not only the Crystal Tower, but as well as Midgardsmoor in one shot. This would be a great place for any player to come to get nice screenshots, depending the weather, of course. I feel like at one point there was a cutscene on top of one of these bridges, but maybe I'm misremembering. If there was, that would at least explain why the player is able to walk on top of these bridges specifically. And that could be a thing for why you can land at a lot of these spots, is maybe they had NPCs and cutscenes in some of these locations. Though it's really hard to say without some insight from the devs themselves. And that does it for another top 10 thingies of Final Fantasy XIV. Up here, another top 10. Down here, another video. Over here, subscribe. And thank you for watching. And thank you to my members. Bye-bye.